How's it going, guys? And welcome to something new. I actually don't have a name for what we're doing. It's just an idea right now. So this one we're going to call 5 Knives, 2 Guys. That's what we're going with right now. And, if I'm going to try something out new, I'm going to grab a guinea pig from one of my friends. So my good buddy Ben Petersen's here from KNAFS Renowned. And he has been working in the knife industry for 14 years. Chances are, if you like knives, it's probably because of Ben, or at least the way you like knives has been influenced a lot by work Ben has done. Is that fair?
I think that's fair.
I think it's fair.
But I don't know because of. That's a strong thing. I may have influenced your knife purchase.
Yeah. You've been around.
I've been kicking around.
You've pulled strings in many arenas.
The other day, I said I feel like part of the furniture now. You know, like you walk into the knife room and it's like, yep, there's Ben the couch.
Yeah,
you know,
you
don't even think about it.
Oh, you got Ken Onion here, and you got Ben there, and okay.
Yeah.
See, that's fair. All right. So the premise of this thing, as you know, I hit you up and I was like, hey, let's have a crazy idea. Let's sit down, kind of long form. Let's grab some knives and let's have a conversation around 5 specific types of knives. Yeah. And I sent you a list of like 20 knives. And then right before this, we narrowed it down. Like I said, this is the first one. So you guys got to let us know if you're digging this or not. So let's just kick it off. So I thought the best way to start this idea, and then the best way to start this conversation in general about knives, is first knives. Yeah. Right? I mean, we all have a first knife story. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't have my first knife because I lost, I don't know, probably 10, 15 knives as a kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Before totally. I finally locked onto one that I was like, my first knife.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So I looked a little bit at what you brought, but what was first knife? What's the first knife?
So I sort of put it into 2 categories, and maybe we throw a third in there. My first knife was like this knife from Yellowstone. I went looking for it in a box last night, could not find it.
Yeah.
So I went for like the first like official knife that somebody gave to me that I was like, cool, this is great.
Yeah.
So a Victorinox, oh man, I think it's called a Mechanic.
Maybe the Mechanic? Okay,
But I think it's discontinued. So this is the original one that I received when I turned 12.
Okay.
Went into Boy Scouts, received this knife, and I was like, okay, this is like my first big boy knife. This is not my first gas station knife, but this is my first like
knife.
Yeah, like don't lose it, this matters knife.
Right.
So this thing, literally, I took this all over the place, like backpacking as a kid, camping. It's got 2 blades, and I love the 2 blades. So you got the bigger blade and then the smaller blade. I did a ton of whittling with when I was a kid.
Awesome.
And this sucker was, first day at scout camp, I handed it to somebody, they used it, and then they handed it back. And the blade on this thing is, it's kind of this spear point, so you don't know which side is which.
Right.
And so I straight up went like that, and it's a slip joint. And I have a lovely scar that needed stitches, but the Scoutmaster was like, bro, I got you hydrogen peroxide, and like just wrapped it.
Yep.
And scout camp for the rest of the week with a thumb that looked like
I love it.
So that was my first, man, and it's been all over, and I love it. I don't use it that much anymore, but I keep it in like my camping kit because I'm like, someday, you never know when you need the toothpick or the tweezers. Like, it's great.
So your camping kit, that like when you go camping, it's like a bag you grab, or just like in your camping stuff here at the house?
Yeah. So no, I keep a little bag.
Yeah.
That's like my possibles bag.
Love it.
Like I keep a little first aid kit, medicine, like survival blanket, matches. Like, so if I'm going hiking, that goes in the bag. If I'm going backpacking, it goes in the bag. Like, it's just sort of like everything stays in there.
Yeah.
So like this doesn't see a lot of use anymore.
Right.
But if I got in a pinch, I know exactly how to use it.
It's still along for the ride.
Yes.
Yeah. I love it. Now here's the thing is does it have some missing tools in it? Am I seeing a missing tool?
No, it's not missing tools.
Oh, okay.
It's missing half the Victorinox.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's been used.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't even know when that fell off, but like,
I love it.
All the tools are there, and I look at that and I'm like, I could go to like Daily Custom Shop and get like a fancy set of titanium, but I'm like, no, this thing, so it's got like mosquito repellent that has like baked the plastic, and like it's missing part of that. Like, there's a lot of story in this thing, and even like. And I'm kind of weird, Zach. You're a little different than that. You like to maintain your stuff pretty well.
Yeah, like decently. Yeah.
This has like grit and grime, and it probably needs a good cleaning. But I'm like, that's part of the story.
So you kind of like the crunch when you open it up?
I kind of do. And I think if I were using it every day, I'd be like, okay, let's maintain it maybe a little better. But I think tools should show where they've been.
I like
a
that.
little bit.
I like that.
And within reason, right? Like,
yeah, I think a clean tool is a happy tool. That's like right, because
Sure.
like growing up in concrete, like you just had to clean your
Yeah.
tools, right? So it just became this thing with all my tools, right?
Yeah.
Clean tool's a happy tool, but like that, like love and patina, I think is very important.
Because like
Yeah.
we'll have knives come into the shop to get sharpened,
Yeah.
and sometimes I look at them and I'm like, oh, you definitely cleaned out a deer like yesterday, on
Right.
this thing, and it's here for sharpening.
Yeah.
And part of me is like, we should clean that up for them and like alcohol it up and like send it out like pristine. And the other part of me is like, no, that's your story to clean up.
Well, and that's something
Like-
that's really interesting. We've done some work with Buck knives, right? And going to Buck, they have a great warranty.
Yeah.
And so people will send their stuff in, and they'll get very specific notes that are like, sharpen the blade, do not
Touch
remove
nothing else.
anything. Literally,
Yeah.
like this little crack means this, and this scuff is when this happened.
Yeah.
And it's like they know the whole story. So I get
Yes.
it. I totally get
And,
it.
and
Yeah,
so
yeah.
there's a part of me that's like, oh, I should throw some oil in there, and I'm like, no, this is a story. It's almost like graduated to story
I love it. Yeah, yeah.
versus like a daily driver that I'm like, yeah, we'll sharpen it up,
Yeah.
we'll throw new scales, we'll
Yeah,
swap
whatever.
it
Just
up,
swap
whatever.
it around.
Yeah.
Like it's like it comes in and out of the pocket.
Yeah.
So here's the question. So two questions with this is not your very first knife. Do you remember what age you got your very first knife at?
I was probably like 6 or 7.
Okay, yeah. I was about the same, like 5, 6, something like that.
Yeah, probably
same.
like
Yeah.
6 or 7. And it's funny because over the years, I always thought like this was my first knife, but then I've been going through my stuff over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And I found knives and I'm like, Yellowstone, like circa 1993, 6 years old, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember I would like, I had this Yellowstone knife. That was probably my very first one. And I would like give it to my dad. He would put it in this high shelf.
Okay. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
had like a window in it.
Yeah.
And I remember I could climb on the bed and like look in the high shelf and be like,
that's so
"There's
cool.
my Yellowstone knife."
Yeah,
We'd go
yeah.
camping or whatever. I'd be
Yeah.
like, "Dad, can I
Get the knife.
Can I get the knife?" He'd be like,
Cool.
"Cool, here it is."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it was almost like this library checkout system in that window shelf up
Yeah,
high.
yeah.
And that was just like part of the environment. Is like,
love it.
this is yours, but it's not yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because 5, 6, right? Like walking around with a knife in your pocket
Yeah,
all
totally.
the time. You're gonna be. That's what I did, right?
Yeah.
I was cutting stuff I shouldn't. I was poking at stuff I shouldn't. Right? Like,
Absolutely.
cutting my finger open all
Yes.
the time. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
So it was sort of like this system at home. It was like, this is yours, but you don't have free reign over it. And
Yeah.
I think that was good for a kid. Like that
No,
was a
I
good
agree.
way to get into it.
I've got some friends. I'm the knife guy in
Yeah.
all the friends and family groups.
As we
right?
all are
As
at
we
this
as we
point.
all are, right? And as the knife guy, I'm the guy that's like responsible for getting knives for people, right?
Yes.
So it's like, oh my, one of the friends' husbands or one of my buddies needs a new knife.
Yeah.
I'm the guy that picks it, right?
Yep.
And we've got some friends that have kids that are getting older. You know them, Pippi and Carl.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Yep.
Pippi and Carl, like their son Lucas, right?
Yes.
I think he's like 8 and a half.
Okay.
And they're ready for him to get his first knife, and he really wants a Victorinox compact because my propaganda. And so
Sorry, I could take that down a deep rabbit hole.
yeah, oh yeah,
We're gonna
deep
stay out
rabbit
of that
hole.
one.
But yeah, so right, Victorinox compact, and but the interesting thing is they're like, is there a way to get a compact without a blade? Because they're like, all the tools are great,
Yeah.
but they're like, we're not sure if we want them walking around all day.
Do you remember
with a
that
knife blade.
there was a knife that came out maybe 8 years ago, Leatherman Leap?
Yep, it was like
and
the TSA. Like
Yeah, well,
yeah.
it was for kids, and they made it in like
wait,
these
no, this is a
plastic
different
colors.
one. Okay, yeah.
So it was a multi-tool. That the blade, you had one chance to stick the blade in, and then it was permanent.
Oh, okay.
So like you could give it to a kid, and they could start learning how to use it, and then when you take the blade, you would stick it in, and it's like,
and then now it's a knife.
and now it's a knife.
Yeah.
I don't think they make it anymore, but it was a really interesting concept, and I'm
is
sure
cool.
they put a ton of R&D into it. But same thing, it's like
Yeah.
they didn't want their kid to have a blade, so like here's this option.
Yep, exactly. Well, and that was one thing is not just in this situation, but anytime somebody's kid wants a knife, I'm like, are you prepared for them to cut their finger? Because that's just a rite of passage.
Yes.
I don't care if you're 5-year-olds when you get your first knife or 20 when you
Yeah.
get your first knife. You are going to slice open your
Oh, yeah.
finger. You know what I mean? And it rarely happens to me anymore. But even me, sometimes I'll still catch myself every once in a while.
Yeah, I got nicked the other day, right there.
Yeah.
What is that new brand? Rava. It's a multi-tool brand. It has.
Oh yeah. The actually really cool. It's like
Yeah.
you can build your own
can
Leatherman
build your own.
basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Can't remember the name of the brand.
Starts
right
with
now.
an R.
Yeah.
and it has a V in it.
Yeah.
Not very memorable.
Not Ray-Ban. No.
I don't know.
Anyways,
Anyways, I had one, gave it to my son, and we were putting it together, and something in that construction and not being used to it nicked me. Not bad, but I was like, oh, new tool.
Yeah.
It's ours now.
Yeah. Yep. I bled on it. It's fine now.
Yeah.
Okay. So final question with this one. Speaking of your son,
Yeah.
is this something you'd pass on, or is it something you're going to hold on to and then get him his own memory?
Do you know what's funny, Zach? So literally yesterday, I was like digging through my stuff trying to find this Yellowstone knife.
Yeah.
And right over here, there's these trunks. These trunks are full of my junk. This is my house. These are
Ben let us take over his house for this.
It's wonderful. But we have these trunks. I have these trunks that have all of my like memorabilia from life. And I'm digging through it, and I've got like stuff from my great grandmother, like this little placard that has her name on it and stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't know when I got this, but at some point she passed and it came to me.
Yeah.
It probably went to my mom, and she's like, I don't know what to do with this. I'm like, that's cool, give it to me.
Yeah.
I almost think some of this stuff, like, they have to find.
Okay.
Meaning,
Yeah.
like, I'm dead and gone, you're going through this stuff, and you're like, whoa, oh, no way, this is Dad's thing, this is Grandma's thing, you know? And I think there's, like, a mystique to that.
And if they put the stamp of, oh, this is cool, then it's worth carrying on. Or if not, you're gone and it just...
Yeah.
Because like that happens a lot, right? It's like when people start going through other people's stuff, it's like, you know, after they're gone, it's like, oh, these 10 things are cool and these 100 things are gone.
And maybe the thing that I want to pass on to him, not so much the object,
right,
but like the eye to look at the object and be like, that meant something.
There's value here.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
Because like this is just stuff.
Yeah.
Right? This is just...
It is. It's just stuff, but when you've had it for so long, you've infused it with more than just stuff.
Right, and I guess maybe the hope would be like, my son has seen this around. He's like, that's cool, you know? Or my daughter's like, oh, I remember that from these camping trips. And like, it becomes more than just stuff. It becomes story.
Cool.
So like yesterday I was showing my wife all this, like these pins and like the Jazz game from 1998 and like just stuff like that. And she's like, you don't really collect stuff, but you have a lot of stuff. And I'm like, I collect stories.
Yep, same.
And I would hope that my kids could see this as a story that eventually they would be excited about.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. It's good philosophy. That's good philosophy.
Because I actually have a lot of stuff, but none of it I've gone out and been like, I want that thing.
Yep.
I want that to be mine and bring it in. I'm like, no, that came to me one way or another, and now it has meaning and value.
Yeah.
So,
well, it has meaning and value because of how you acquired it, but probably more because of the miles you've put on it. Right? Yeah. That's what I find, because like I have the same. I have like an old chest I got at JCPenney when I was like 10. You know what I mean? It's falling apart, right? And then I have a couple like plastic boxes full of stuff. Yeah. And I can go through it and I can tell you exactly the story of like why that thing didn't get thrown away. Right? Yeah.
Well, and I would say the things from my great grandmother, like, I don't know why it didn't get, I mean, it's cool to me, but like, why did she save like this campaign button from 1941 or whatever? Like, why is that still in there? I don't know, but for me, she saved it, and I'm like, that's cool now. It's vintage, and it's like, I'm keeping
lasted.
it.
Yeah. That's fair. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
All right, but you had a second kind of qualifier. In your knife, your first knife.
So I sort of went with like Victorinox was like the first knife that mattered to me. Yeah. In like a don't lose it. This is important.
Yeah.
And then the second knife would be the Spyderco Delica 4 in that FRN, and this was the first knife that I bought.
Okay, yeah.
Not with play money. Yeah. Meaning, like, I didn't go to a Yellowstone gift shop and, like, impulsive me was like, I want that.
Yeah, buy $7 or $10 knife or whatever.
This was like a $75 knife at the time, bought in 2011 when I entered the knife industry. And probably about 6 months after I got into it.
And let's be honest, $75 on a knife in 2011 was actually, like, kind of real money.
This for me was, like, this was the knife. I was working at Blade HQ, and I'm like, I accept my role in knives. Because I've been making videos about them, Zach. I've been 6 months making these YouTube videos, and I'm like, this is a job, this is a job, this is a job.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know what these knife guys are doing, but like, I'll feed them content.
Right.
This was the knife that I bought, and I said, this I'm going to learn. And I took it apart, and I learned to sharpen it. And like, this became almost this mental shift for me from working a job to really like taking the job into your mind and heart and saying, I'm going to rock this job.
Well, and like being part of something, right?
Yes.
Maybe that's that's your first step really into the knife community.
Yes.
Even though you've been making videos for 6 months. And like knife internet in 2011 was completely different. As well, right?
Huge.
Like, hugely
totally different.
Yeah.
But so this was the one that I was like, okay, I'm starting to understand this knife thing, because like a Victorinox is the knife industry, but this is not the knife industry.
No, it's not.
Like my father-in-law carried a Victorinox, like had zero interest in knives, but he's like, this is a box opener for me.
Yep, exactly.
And everybody knows it, it's iconic, but like when you go and buy a Spyderco Delica, you're saying, I have done a little bit of research, and I know that there are things beyond this that I might want to buy.
Yep. Well, and the funny juxtaposition between those two is I feel like so many of us abandoned the first, the Swiss Army, because we're like, oh yeah, we need something better. And then honestly, I don't know about you, but like for myself, like with the compact, right?
Yeah.
Like I ended up, it was at Blade HQ. I ended up doing a video about Victorinoxes, and I like to be expert. So I was like, cool, I'm going to carry all these ones. We're going to talk to experts. We're going to do the whole thing. And I put that compact in my pocket and it never came out. Because I was like, oh wait, I forgot how useful it was. So it's like, it's kind of this fun, like full circle sometimes.
Totally.
Right? Yeah,
because I think in a lot of ways, like you can do just about, I mean, you can do more with this.
Yeah, you can do a lot more with that, right?
Especially like with that slip joint. You can cut your thumb all day, man.
Exactly.
But really, like, this is a great tool for so many things.
It's surprisingly a great tool, but I think so many of us were introduced to it so young. At least in my brain, it was a toy for so many years.
Yeah, that's
it's like, it's a toy, it's a toy, it's a toy. And I think that also had to do with, like, as I got older, realizing that the knife itself wasn't the window into, like, the knife itself wasn't going to turn on skill sets I didn't have.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, you know, when I got, like, I don't know, 12, 13 and kind of abandoned Victorinox, right? I, like, abandoned it more because I'd pull it out and try to do something, and I couldn't do it. But it wasn't the tool's fault, it was my knowledge fault, right? And I think that's why, as I was older, I could appreciate the compact so much more because I knew how to do so much more stuff. That I was like, oh, if I have a couple, like if I can pry on stuff and drive stuff, and I have a way to like cut stuff, I can do a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
That's cool.
I've been thinking about it a lot lately, and I think that's like
cool.
part of it. You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
So it's sort of like two knives, like rite of passage, 12 years old.
Yeah.
Rite of passage, 22.
Yeah.
You know, sort of this idea that like, this was given to me, this was bought on purpose.
Yeah.
And so I would call this like my first official knife guy knife.
Yeah. And I feel like for those of us who are like in it, like in the community, that is like the common story, right?
Yeah.
Is we have the first knife and then we have the knife guy.
Yeah.
Right.
The one that says, this is something, this is a hobby, this is something I enjoy.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Okay. So with the Blue Delica, I know that it has become a bit of a grail knife for a lot of people. What's the craziest offer? I know you've gotten some offers on this knife in the past where people were like,
I don't know, man. Like,
okay, I could have swore I have remembered it would show up every once in a while on social media and people would hit you up like, hey, how much for that knife? Like,
I think you might be right. Look, like this knife doesn't mean anything to anybody else.
Right.
Right. Like you can literally go buy this exact knife today.
Right.
Direct from Spyderco. Buy it on Amazon. Like.
Yeah.
It's great. It's a great knife, but like this one it's mine, and some things aren't for sale.
There you go.
Right? Like,
well, I know you would never sell it, right?
Well, but like I don't know, and especially professionally, like this has to be part of that story. Like I bring this out on videos, right?
Yeah, like this, right? Or you're telling your knife journey.
Yeah,
right?
like I don't even carry this anymore, Zach. Like not out of disinterest. I'm working on other things now, and this is like a piece of the journey at this point. How do you sell your journey?
Right. Well, and that's
you can.
That's something that you're so great about, though, in general. Like when you're talking about stories and stuff, right? Like even back at KNAFS HQ, right? Like you're so good at at almost keeping a journal with the things that you have, right? That you can go back to them like this, right? And I've seen you in your design process. I've seen you pull out knives like this, right? And set them down and be like, what is it that I love about this knife? What is the thing? You know what I mean?
That's a good way to look at it, like a journal of objects.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah. And I feel like you have such a stellar journal of objects.
Yeah.
That like I said, anytime that I've seen you in your design mode, like I just love seeing like you have like 50 knives out and you're holding them all and you're measuring them and you've got all your little like desk tools. I don't know if you still do that, but you used to have all the little desk tools, you know? And I loved watching the process because it was this very intimate way, like a physical journal, right? Like or like an objects journal, right?
Yeah. So what I've been trying to do is like take those pieces and parts, and obviously we don't put everything in, but like if you come in the KNAFS storefront, we have that journey like documented from like cardboard to plastic to steel, and like how does that work? Because like the prototypes matter to me, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the process of remembering that like, oh yeah, the big banter when I designed it, like we did this, and this, and then okay, I landed on that for these reasons. So I think sometimes when you erase the prototype process, you lose part of the journey as a creator.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. Well, and I think as a creator and as a company.
Yeah.
You know, like, and because I've done work with like big knife companies, right? And you talk to some of these knife companies that are 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, And that's exactly it. They're like, yeah, in fact, we have a collectors club that teaches us more about our history than we ever knew because they were so busy just producing that they lost so much, right? And I think that it's a bummer from an enthusiast standpoint for them to have lost it, but I think for them as creators and as makers, it's a bummer too because, like you said, okay, here's the big banter. Here's why I made these decisions. Here's why I didn't make these. And here's all the physical proof. You remember, you know, and then you're less likely, I think, to remake the same mistakes.
It's interesting, Zach. When I worked at CRKT, my first week there, I was trying to wrap my head around their M16 line.
Yeah,
I've talked about this before, but
this.
I laid them all out on the table. I actually took pictures of them and labeled them and like tried to make like this flow chart of like how we got here. And I eventually gave up. And I think I asked the owner or the marketing guy, my boss, I was like, why don't we keep track of this history? They're like, well, it's a sales company. And I don't mean this rude to CRKT.
Yeah, no, not at all.
They're like, we are a sales company. Things come in, we sell them, and we move on. But like people want to feel that history and they want to walk into your lobby and sort of see that process on display. Like one of every, can you see it? And maybe they've done this since then, but like, what if you had one of every M16 model ever made and
awesome.
It's a wall like this, right? Like even at SHOT Show last year, I was at the Boker booth and Lucas Burnley's Quaken, the Quaken model, they had a wall of Quakens, probably 40 Quakens, brass and titanium and liner lock, frame lock, like all the things. And I'm like, I took a picture and sent it to Luke and I was like, this is legacy. This is cool. And I get excited about that stuff. And that's not to dog on CRKT, but like for me, that story and seeing the continuity as it flows through the pieces is really important.
Yeah.
And I get a kick out of it too, just visually, because it's like, it's almost like if you go fishing in Alaska, like, you know how they line up all the fish?
Yeah.
And you're like, these are all the fish. And I think in some ways that's what that display does, is it lines up all the fish and shows somebody, hey, we went fishing.
Yeah.
Here's what we caught.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
and you're going to eat the fish and they're gone, but you have that picture.
But you have at least a snapshot.
Yeah.
And
I think that's an important part of the journey, is that snapshot of like, we did this.
I love that. Well, and that's the thing is like most of my knife collection is made up of knives around stories. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I've been in it now long enough that I have a lot of knives. But a lot of knives I probably wouldn't get rid of because they're snapshots, right?
Yeah.
It's like remembering something.
Yes.
And like, you know me, if it's not in a journal, because I keep a pretty like, you know, tight journal, like
exhaustive.
If it's not in a journal or I don't have a thing, it's gone. Like I will not, like 6 months later, no idea, you know? So
Totally.
I've always loved that about your process. And I think that like the note to CRKT, they're not the only ones like that.
No.
Like so many, most of the bigger knife companies that I've talked to, that's the case. Is it's not like a callous, like we're a sales company, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, this is the business. Like we have to keep moving knives.
And I'm seeing that happening with KNAFS, where it's like, oh, we're running fast and like the history matters, but also like we got to feed people, you know?
Exactly.
and I'm really trying to help preserve that. We literally just yesterday we bought a cabinet, like this big map cabinet, 15 drawers. Yeah. To put all of these 3D prints and prototypes into a place that we can keep and it matters. So to me, it's important.
And I completely agree. Like I said, I think the process is just so, it's inspiring, right? Yeah. To watch you work when you're in that mode is inspiring. That's and fun. Right, things like first knives, right?
Oh yeah.
All right, so the next knife in our what were we calling this thing? Five Knives, Two Guys.
Five Knives, Burgers and Fries.
Yeah, you had an idea. What? Yeah.
Came from my sister.
You got to pitch it.
Okay,
like,
here's the pitch,
let them know
guys.
in the comments.
We call this Five Knives, Burgers and Fries. Zach has to bring the guest the burgers and fries from that town. They eat burgers and fries and talk about the Five Knives.
Yeah, because my plan is to travel around with this and talk to people you guys care about. If you guys show up and watch it.
Five Knives, Burgers and Fries.
So I might try. That might be the next one. I might try it out.
I think it's fun. The only problem with that is the setup for something like this.
Yeah,
takes a minute.
It does. Yeah.
And so you're going to be eating cold burgers and fries.
That's true.
Five Knives, cold burgers.
Maybe
and
it's
fries.
like set it up, run out and grab the burgers and fries, come back.
And then come back.
Maybe that's what we do. We'll figure it out. All right. So out of the list of knives, we narrowed down to 5. The next one was Apocalypse knife.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: is you showed me this just briefly right before we started.
Yes.
I think that this perfectly personifies so many people's idea of apocalypse knife, and so many people's execution of an apocalypse knife. So walk me through this thing.
Okay. This is the ultimate survival tips. MSK1. B, the multi-scenario knife.
Okay.
So my friend David designed this. He's given it to me. You can see it has 0 use.
Yeah.
Literally have never used it. And that's not a knock on David at all. This is in hatchet territory. It's
You haven't been in an apocalypse yet.
I haven't. Not yet. This is like Tom Brown tracker style where
Yes.
like you can really like work this
It looks
thing.
like it's like a 1/4 inch thick.
It almost is, man.
So thick, dude.
It's wild. So I've never used it mostly because like this is what I think of an apocalypse knife. You can pull the handle off. It's got a survival kit in it. Bow drill, divot there.
Yep.
So the funny thing about this one for me, a little bit of history, is David was working on this right as I was leaving CRKT in 2016.
Okay, up in Oregon area.
Up in Oregon, and a guy named Jeff Freeman did the manufacturing on this. Jeff used to work at Gerber. He designed like the 01 Auto,
Oh, cool.
a whole
Okay.
bunch of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
I think the LMF series was all Jeff.
Wow. Okay, yeah.
So anyway, David was having him doing the manufacturing, and I was in Oregon. David was like, "Hey, could you go film an interview with Jeff?" So I took CRKT's equipment in my last 2 weeks and did this side consulting gig.
Love it.
I'm like, I'm leaving anyway, guys. And let's be honest, like I've used a lot of my equipment. And
Right, yeah,
I deserve this.
Yeah.
So I took the equipment, went and helped film this Kickstarter project for this particular knife.
Cool.
But really, like, if you were in the apocalypse, man, like, and you had to like build something or like zombie it up, like. Rock and roll, brother. You know?
Hell yeah, brother.
Yeah, that's right. You know, Kydex sheath, and it's got a lot of lashing options, a lot of ways to carry it. And like, look, this is cool. For me, I'm gonna take a hatchet camping, or I'm gonna take like, this is a lot of knife, brother.
It is. It's a lot of knife. Well, here, and this is why I say it. I feel like it perfectly personifies apocalypse knife because one, I think it hits the category in that when you think apocalypse knife, you think something that's never going to break.
Yeah.
Something that I can sharpen on a rock. You know what I mean, like apocalypse knife.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
But I think the other half of that is that, and I don't know, you probably don't fall in this category as much, right? Like I kind of forced your hand, like what's the apocalypse?
Sure.
Knife, right? But I think for like so many people, there's like this. I think especially for a lot of men, right?
Yep.
There's this like, oh, I want to be the last guy at the bunker holding back the zombies with my knife and my gun that only has 3 shots left. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like
totally.
it's such a cool feeling, right?
Well, and Hollywood's taught us that.
Yeah, and Hollywood has like super taught us that, right? But I think that the other half of it is that I see so many people with like bug out bags and all like, oh, this, and all of it looks like that.
Yep.
Brand new gear, right? Like you're mentioning, there's a survival kit in there. You've probably never pulled the survival kit, maybe once for the shoot.
I'll be honest, I don't think it's come out of there, Zach.
Right? Yeah, like, so
Don't
you
think it's come
may
out.
not even know what's in there. Do you know how to use what's in there? Like, you talk about a bow drill. Do you know how to,
Dude, no.
can you make a fire with a bow drill?
Not at all. Not at all. It's on my list of things to learn, but like that doesn't help me in the apocalypse.
No, that's why it's like such a perfect personification is like, it's the equipment, but also I feel like the exact amount of use most people put into their apocalypse gear.
Seriously.
Right?
Well, and I think it's that old saying, it's not the arrow, it's the archer.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
100%.
This is a cool arrow, bro.
Yep.
But like, do I know how to use it? No. And to David's credit, so David lives on a farm.
Yeah.
This would be a great farm knife.
Dude, it's probably a great knife for what it's meant
Yeah.
for, right? Like it's not a knock on the knife, but like I said,
It's a knock on the mindset.
It is.
Because
it is. Yeah.
we want this to save our butts when we've done nothing,
Yep.
no skills to actually have our butts saved.
I had a video just recently where I was going through my everyday bag, right? And like, I'm on the road all the time, right? Alley cat, I think is how I've been personified.
I have called you that.
Yes, so I'm always on the road. So my everyday bag is way too much, right? Like what I carry in a bag every day is silly, right?
Yeah.
But then when you take what I actually do, it's like, oh no, it actually makes a lot of sense what you carry, And so the whole time I'm like, carry what you need what you carry, right?
Yeah.
The whole time I'm just professing this, right?
Yes.
And I got to some point of gear and I can't remember what it was. And I was like, how many of you guys have fire starters and know how to actually use them? And how many of you guys have fire starters and know how to and have tried to use them when your fingertips are frozen, right? Like when you actually would need it, do you know how to use it? And I think that it's indicative, not just in knife world. This is generally, right?
Yep.
Like I've got buddies that have money who have garages full of tools that they have used twice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I'm glad you have them, but if you don't know how to use them, they're not really going to do you much good.
And I think it's so much easier to buy a tool than to buy a skill.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
that's the reality,
right?
of it.
And it's like with the Victorinox I was talking about as a kid, right? Like my desire to do a thing, or even my imagination to do a thing, didn't match my skill level. so the tool must be broken,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, no, I was broken. Not broken, it was young, you know. But
Yeah,
the idea, right?
Right,
Like,
but I think in a consumer society, we can say, I'm going to buy a truck.
yeah.
And you go and buy a truck, and like, well, do you take it off road? Do you know how to fix a flat? Do you know how to get yourself unstuck? Like, I think it's because you can buy the thing with your money, but you have to buy the skills with your time. And a lot of times your time costs more than the money. Because
Time is a luxury.
Yeah.
For all of us. Like, I don't
is.
care who you are. Time is a luxury. Like,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, I've worked with guys. I was doing a job for a buddy who has a bunch of car brands, right?
Yeah.
And he's got a lot of money. He's a great guy. My buddy Greg, love him, right? And even him, he has 25 supercars. Like, to give you the range of what money this guy operates in. And even for him, time is a luxury. You know what I mean? Like, it's the greatest luxury we have.
It is.
Yeah. So,
Seriously.
right, like, is it worth your time to learn how to use bow drill? You know what I mean?
At some point, yes. I'm going to get there, Zach. I'm going to get there. Not this week, though.
Yeah, not this week. I love it.
And that's the problem, man.
Yep.
Because it should be, if it's a priority, you'll get it done.
That's it.
And if it's not, your bow drill of it,
yeah, exactly.
I've seen it done a couple times.
Well, and then when the apocalypse happens, how are you going to start a fire?
Dude, I'm going to find my friend Tyler, and I'm going to be like, Tyler, I'm ready. I'm
you
ready.
go.
Teach me.
He's going to be down in his bunker, posted up, dude. You're never going to find him.
I'll be like, it's bow drill time.
All right, so we've got our last tool, not really a used tool, but I think we didn't even talk about this beforehand, but just beautifully captures that category, in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
But ironically, the next category is the exact opposite end of the spectrum for you, at least, and that's multi-tools.
Multi-tools.
Okay, so I was like, all right, what's like the go-to multi-tool, no matter what? I already knew the answer to this one.
Yeah.
Right? But I think for you guys, this is a really fun conversation. We could get in a big argument, but we already did it.
I'll
leave a link in the description. I'll leave a link in the description of the argument we had over this. So multi-tool. What's your multi-tool choice?
I'm a Leatherman squid guy.
Yeah.
All day, every day.
Or not squid, squirt.
Squirt, excuse me.
Yeah.
Yep.
We were talking squid earlier.
We were. Leatherman Squirt PS4. It's discontinued, but if you look at that up close,
It's so beautiful.
the patina, it used to be blue. It's a shade of light blue at this point. But I carry this every day.
Yeah.
I use it all the time. I mean, it's like New Year's and you need a bottle opener. Like, open up a bottle, right? Like, screwdriver, you got your pliers on there. I'm a pliers guy.
Yeah.
Little pliers. I'm not a big pliers guy.
You're not a big pliers
I'm not
guy.
a Nip-X guy. I am a little pliers guy. And
Now, if I remember correct, what are you using because I actually can't remember. What are you using those little pliers for? What do you find yourself using them for the most? Is it a consistent task, or is it just like because it's in your your holster, right, of things you can do, you're like, you can pull it out of the bag and use it whenever you need to?
Yeah, it's never anything specific.
Yeah. I find that with my Knipex. It's not a consistent thing where I'm like, I encounter this bolt every day, right?
No,
but
this
it's like,
is...
because I have it, I find myself using it often.
Yes, exactly. And this is just like, I don't know, man, like... Even like if you drop something behind the couch or like that's 6 more inches.
Right, it's a little grip extender.
Yeah, like stupid stuff like that. The scissors are on there. So the scissors I actually use quite often for like moleskin. So if I'm out hiking, these guys are great. It's kind of hard to cut moleskin with a knife. It's possible, but if you're looking for precision,
scissors are much nicer. I completely agree. My compact scissors, I've cut a lot of moleskin with my compact scissors.
So I don't know. This is one of those things. Like even like I'll use the file for my fingernails.
Yeah,
and that's a stupid little thing, but it's like it makes me happy and it makes me smile, and it's a fixture in the bottom of my pocket at this point.
Yep.
I probably use the flashlight attached to this more than the multi-tool at this point, but like this is like if you were to take away my knife, I'd be like, cool, it's fine, I have another one.
Yep.
Like this pairing is nice.
Yep. So. It doesn't happen often, but every once in a while I'll be in a rush leaving a campsite or leaving my house or whatever to go do whatever I'm doing, and I'll end up not with a pocket knife in my pocket. It's very rare, but it will happen. But I always have my Victorinox Compact in my wallet.
Yes.
And I always have my wallet because it has my other tools as well. And so it's like, same thing. I always at least have something I can cut with and a couple tools, right? To get through in the world. Yeah.
So I don't look at this as a hard use tool. This is very much, it's on my person. It's convenient. It's great. I mean, like even like I used to do a ton of videos. So like tightening tripod heads, it's just nice to have a flathead. And when you go from like, so I think this is actually an important distinction. like when you go from this world to this world,
Yep.
you actually give up a lot of tools.
You do. Yeah.
So toothpick, tweezers, things like that. So in some ways, I've almost replaced like the Victorinox with this plus like a pen that has toothpick and tweezers in it.
Right. Yeah.
And so instead of one tool, I'm carrying 3.
Right.
Good job, Ben.
Yeah. Well, this is the problem though, is once you get into it and you actually are carrying what you need and needing what you carry, that's what I find is I'm always trying to evolve my carry to simplify it more. And I've gotten to the point, and I think you're to this point as well in my like gear journey, where when I take something away, I violently miss it.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I really needed that thing because I've thought so much about what I'm carrying, but I also don't want to carry as many things. It's like I'm like chained to carrying more because I find it so useful. And then I'm also chained to this ideology of I want less in my pockets.
Yeah, and I think like you and I are not old. But
No.
we are absolutely hitting middle age.
Yeah, like middle-aged, squarely middle-aged.
I have embraced, I've been thinking about that, like, middle age, whoa,
Yeah.
middle age.
Yeah, I'm
right?
halfway done.
37 headed to 40, like average lifespan is 75 for males in the U.S.
Yep, exactly. Well, and how old I live, I'm not making it 75.
Well, and I've kind of been thinking about that, like second, like you're over the hill, as they say, but
Yeah.
you're over that hump of life, and like some of the things that I really valued when I was younger, not that I'm old,
No, yeah.
but younger, are starting to change where I'm like, oh yeah, convenience matters and like comfort matters. So like I used to camp on like this really crappy pad.
Yeah.
And I just spent like $200 on like this Nemo pad the other day, and I'm like, oh, this is nice.
Yeah, exactly.
And like I always used to dog on people that are in RVs camping. I'm like, that's not camping. And I'm like, oh, what you got there in RV? You know, like I'm starting to understand that like comfort in life matters, and you're different. Like you're still sleeping in the back of your Forerunner because you love it.
I still sleep behind dumpsters when I'm on my motorcycle. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I will say, when it comes to my family, right? When it comes to my family, my brain is doing the same thing.
Yeah.
My brain is like, oh, I mean, would it be so bad to have a bumper pull camper for my girls to be able
Right.
to, you know what I mean,
Like-
to be more comfortable? Because like again, I'll sleep in the dirt all day, but like I do see the same shift, but not necessarily for myself, but for those
I bought a cot
in charge of.
I bought a cot last year. Zach.
Oh, you bought a cot.
I bought a cot, man. And I realize this is far out of the multi-tools scenario, but like I bought a cot for camping because I'd been borrowing my mom's, and I'm like, it's like living at my house. I'm like, okay, it's probably time.
You're like, I'm an adult. I should probably buy my
Yeah, but it's like if I'm gonna keep going and doing this thing, like I have to get a good night's sleep, or I'm gonna be grumpy the next day.
Yeah.
And so like you start to like evolve, and I think that's where someday I could probably see myself back here,
Right. Yeah.
carrying this, because I'm like, well, a pocket knife does one thing.
Yep.
And it's fun and it's cool, but like maybe this is where I go next. I don't know. If you guys at home, is that what old age does? Or you're like, forget it. I don't want 4 things in my pocket. I want 1.
When I started carrying my compact, I can tell you right now, like I very much could just carry the compact most days. Like do I love having, especially something that's got like my name on it? Do I love having something in my pocket? Of course, right?
Yeah.
And this is way more useful for what I do on the daily. Have a bigger blade, make sure it locks, blah blah blah. And it's a hobby at this point as well. So I like to have different ones and put different ones in my pocket. But like if you twisted my arm, I could put a compact in my pocket, and for the most part, I'd be just fine.
Yeah.
And I've always got a small fixed blade in my bag. So if I needed something that a slip joint couldn't handle, I've got it with me.
Yeah.
Like not on me, but I got it with me. You know.
Totally. And I don't know. I think that's the evolution of the tools you carry and the things you do. When I was doing video stuff and moving and shaking and doing things like that, I found a multi-tool much more useful. As you asked about this today, like, how are you using this? I'm like, whoa, I'm not using it as much.
Yeah.
And I realized that even about like using my hands, like I use my brain a lot.
Yeah.
And my brain gets tired, but like, so like sitting down and figuring out like, oh, I want to build this in my backyard or this or that. Like I'm doing less of that, not because I don't want to, but because I'm more tired than ever.
Well, and that's a real thing when your job is brain work, right? Like it really is hard to like go outside of that and then be like, okay, now I'm gonna have to apply my brain to an entirely new thing, right? And then now I have to think about physical dimensions, and I have to think about stability, and I have to you want to build a swing set or whatever, right? Like even just assembling stuff. Like I find myself the same way, where if shifting between the two, like if I get in a mode where I'm building a lot, that's all I want to do. Like, I don't want to go back to then thinking about, oh, I got to think about search engine optimization, and I have to think about, right, like thumbnails and video titles, right? And it's like, no, I just want to build things, right?
Yeah,
right?
totally.
And then when I find myself in the digital realm a lot, right? I actually don't want to be there. But then going back to the physical realm, it's hard.
Yeah, and I think it's you improve what you spend time doing.
And that's exactly
and it comes to back to the time, right? Like, I would love, I have this idea for like this play hut in my backyard. And I'm like, oh yeah, I could totally do that. And then I'm like, oh, time, 3 trips to Home Depot, and like we got a soccer game. And I don't know if life was supposed to be designed this way, but it is this way right now.
Yep.
And I kind of have to, like, if I'm going to take something on, I have to be really serious about like how many hours is this going to take? Do I have that many hours?
Yep.
And maybe I do, maybe I don't. But a lot of times it means I'm not using the multi-tool as much as not that I'm going to build a hut in the backyard.
No, of course
like,
not. Yeah.
More just talking conceptually. It's like, am I going to sit for 4 hours and figure out how to fix my mountain bike? Or am I going to take it to a shop?
Yep.
And I think maybe that's part of like this middle age for me.
Yeah.
Is I'm like, I'm taking it to the shop.
Yeah.
You know?
Well,
like,
and there are certain tasks even that like are like, oh, I like that, where it's like I'm actually a master bike mechanic, right? Like I've ran multiple bike shops, blah blah blah, right? Like I'm a master bike mechanic, and even I might be like, I'm just gonna take it to the shop. I've done it a million times. This isn't something that I need to learn or that I need to perfect, and I don't have the time for it.
And I don't have the time.
Yeah, and that's what oil changes. I outsourced oil changes on my vehicles like 3 years ago. I was like, I am just gonna take it to a place. I'm gonna pay $40 extra and have the oil change done because I don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
Right? Which is such a silly little thing, but it makes a difference.
No, but I think that's part of growing up and maybe being able to buy your time back a little bit. Mm-hmm. But like you said, time is the biggest thing we have.
Greatest luxury we have. Yeah.
So.
And it's the one thing you can't buy.
Yeah.
Right? Like you got, time-saving devices, right? And this is something we used to say a lot, especially right around the advent of like smartphones.
Yep.
I mean, it's been around for a long time, but smartphones were supposed to save us all this time, and all they do is suck time.
And then they suck your time.
And I tell this to everybody. I'm like, if this is a time-saving device, where's the bank I put my free time in?
Yeah.
Where is it, right?
Yeah.
If I have a dishwasher and I'm not doing the dishes by hand, right? Where's the bank that the dishwasher time goes now?
Into your smartphone.
Into my smartphone. Or like somewhere that doesn't matter. I actually can't bank my time, right? And so it's about being intentional about how I choose to use my time.
Yeah.
Maybe it's better for me like to do the dishes by hand for whatever reason, right? Cool. Because the stupid dishwasher might be saving you 30 minutes, but where's the 30 minutes going, right?
Yeah.
You're just going to work more. You're just going to be on your phone more, right? Like it seems a little pessimistic, but I think that's generally a true statement.
It's the idea of being deliberate with what you do.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that having a multi-tool, whatever it is, right? I love this one because it's not like some big whatever. It's not 50 things, right? I think that having a multi-tool is part about being deliberate.
Yeah.
Engaging, and a big part of my EDC philosophy is being helpful.
Yeah,
right?
be useful.
Just have something in your pocket that you can help somebody else out with.
Yep.
Right? Yeah. And we're back. You probably didn't know that we had left, but we had a little break here for just a second. Right after we were talking multi-tools. Time's a luxury, right?
It is. It is. We've said it 10 times.
And it feels like a luxury that like it's hard to afford sometimes. Yep. So we're making time.
We are.
All right. So we're talking. We're coming out of multi-tools. We're talking a little bit about middle age. We're talking about comfort. We're talking a little bit of retrospect, right?
Yep.
And I actually think it's a perfect segue, unintentionally, a perfect segue into kind of the next category that I gave you, which was your most important knife. I think was specifically the word that I used. So like the most important knife in your entire knife collection. And so before we even look at it, was this a hard decision to make?
Okay, so that's interesting because what you just said, most important knife in your collection.
Yeah.
I kind of took it a different direction. Most important knife, I took 2 directions that are different from the one you just said.
Oh, even better.
Direction number 1 is, what is the most important knife to me right now?
Okay.
And that is the Lander 2.
Ah, yes.
And the reason this is the most important knife, and this configuration is a great example, this is the micarta with the moondust finish, S35VN Lander 2. Feels like a sales pitch, maybe it is. This is the most important knife because this keeps the lights on.
Ah, yes. Okay.
So for me, most important as a knife business owner, not a collector. I don't have like my dad's buck knife from 1960. No, like this is the knife that feeds the people that work at KNAFS.
Cool.
And that, I think, is important. And every company has that, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm grateful that we're starting to stumble into that, whether it's your Benchmade 940, your Sabenza, your Griptilian, your Delica, like your paramilitary 2.
Your Buck 110.
Your Buck 110, your Kalashnikov for Boker. Like, every company has their knife that keeps the lights on. And I've felt that for a couple of years. I'm like, we got to find our lights on knife.
Yeah.
And so for us, the Lander 2 is our most important because this is what we make that we do a lot of.
Cool.
And we feed a lot of people off of this. So not exclusively, but if you took this out, I'd be like, ah, crap.
Yeah.
So
it's an important tent post to hold the tent up.
Yes. And like, are there other tent posts? Yes.
Of course.
Like, don't be a single point of failure. But when it comes to my most important knife right now, it is the Lander 2.
Cool. Yeah, nature doesn't like a monocrop.
Correct.
And neither does business.
No, it does not.
For that fact.
No, it does not.
Well, and I think the Lander 2, I mean, from a not business standpoint, right? Like, there's a good reason I think that you could put a pin in the Lander 2 like that, because the Lander 2 is a stellar knife. You know what I mean? I mean, value proposition, obviously all the fun materials and scales and whatnot, right? Like, the crossbar lock. Do you guys have? I actually don't know. Do you have a name for your crossbar lock?
So we officially call it a clutch lock because it is Kaiser's.
Yeah.
Because it's adjustable on the inside. But honestly, is it a Kleenex or a tissue?
Right.
It's crossbar lock is a tissue.
Yeah.
Right?
It's an axis lock. It's a clutch lock. It's a crossbar lock.
It's just like what can we use that we won't get sued? Like, crossbar lock is universal.
Yeah, of course.
Point.
Yeah. I actually, from what I remember, because this is a conversation we have primarily on the internet, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't, when I'm talking to a buddy and it has a crossbar lock on a knife, I just say axis lock. I don't care what the stupid.
See, and I trained myself not to, because chances of Benchmade suing you are low.
Yeah, exactly.
Chances of Benchmade suing me, not saying they would.
Right.
But they could, because that is a trademark.
Because technically it's trademark. And that's why I say it's an internet conversation.
Yeah.
And this goes back to my intro of you and like how we think about knives, I think, in the knife world. You were the first person that I remember consistently saying crossbar lock.
Because I don't want to get sued, man.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
well, I think it was even before. I think it was even before you had anything with a crossbar lock.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Like,
because I knew at some point.
Yeah, we were seeing it start to develop in the community and in different knife companies as the axis lock patents opened. Right.
Because it had to go from Kleenex to tissue in my mind, and so I almost always call it a crossbar lock now, even though this is a clutch lock.
Yeah, it's crossbar lock.
It's a crossbar lock because I want to say tissue instead of Kleenex, and that's the curse of running a business, right? Like I'm not saying I have a target, but I could.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, there's a little more liability than just enthusiasts talking.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I say like a conversation for the internet, because as people who talk about knives on the internet, right? And this goes for all of our friends who talk about knives on the internet. We all have to think about how we're talking about things to not misnomer them and to represent things correctly.
Yeah.
And, right? It's like this fun little thing that you play in your head. But like, in my day-to-day, axis lock.
Yeah.
Just like, oh, cool, it's got an axis lock on it. Right?
Totally. Funny little story. When I pitched the Banter, the original Banter, it had a crossbar lock on it.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's okay. Yeah.
And I actually pitched it. So it was when the crossbar lock was the axis lock was coming into
open domain or whatever it's called.
Public domain.
Public, there it is.
I pitched it as the allied lock.
Okay.
Do you see what I did there?
Yes, I love it.
It never took off.
Yeah, fair.
But I always thought that would be a fun little...
Axis and allied, I love it.
It would be a fun little jab, but it never took off.
Never took
off,
yeah.
You know, when you make things, you kind of get this... You get to play the game of what are the Easter eggs that I threw into this
100%.
thing. And I enjoy that. I enjoy that part of it too much.
Yeah.
It's probably bad.
Yeah. Well, even stupid things that people don't see, like I do this with physical things that I make as well, right? Like everything I make, I put my maker's mark on it, right? So like that's my little Easter egg for things that I make, right? So it's like I might make a table or a set of cabinets, and I put my maker's mark on it. But recently was working on some stuff on an LLC thing, doing some consultation, and I got the chance to name it, right? And I'm part of it, right?
Yeah.
And so I named it Prison Cabin. Specifically because of the story of the Yonder and you locking me in a cabin.
Prison cabin.
Nobody will ever see that, right? But for me, it's just like, haha, when I see it, I get to have a little giggle at it. It's my little Easter egg,
I love that. I love that. I know another company that they're like, because back-end LLCs like that never are really public.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
There's one called Cut the Pickle LLC.
Perfect.
That I'm aware of.
Yeah, that's fun. That's fun.
And I can see the two guys that started it. Like, what should we name it? Tickle, tickle, cut the pickle. I'm like, put it down, right? Like,
Exactly.
I don't know. Humans are weird, man.
Yeah, no,
it's great.
It's this fun thing where we want to put our thumbprint. I think especially like if you're a creative person, right? Like you want to put your thumbprint on things. But I don't know if you end up in this, but what I find is that when I start to want to create something, right, and it's specifically more like in the knife world or the motorcycle world or something in that line. When it comes to carpentry, I've done it long enough that I just know what I want to do, right?
Yeah.
But when I want to create something in these other worlds that I'm not maybe as in control of, or maybe in worlds that I'm maybe personally known a little more, I feel I get stuck in that sometimes.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, okay, what are all the things that anybody has ever done in this thing, right? Or like, how can I make something funny? Or what's the perfect name for it, right? And a lot of times done is better than perfect.
Oh, it's all the time. Not all the time, but like
most of the times done is better than perfect, right?
I
Like
think
not getting lost in that element of it, or like what could go wrong or whatever. And I guess like when we're talking about your most important knife, or at least this version of your most important knife, like what do you use to overcome that? Like how do you? Because I know you, we've worked together, we've been friends for years now, and we worked together for years. Like you can be a perfectionist, like you can be, right? But you still get stuff done, right?
For sure.
But even taking it one step further and like these leaps that you're making at KNAFS, right? Like how are you managing that? What's your mantra, right?
Yeah, so my degree's in broadcast and film, and I remember a film class, like somebody saying a film is never finished, it just escapes.
Okay.
And I think that's the same for art. Art is never finished, it just escapes.
Fair.
Like if you're making a film, at some point there's a deadline.
Yeah.
And you must get it out.
Yeah.
And in fact, I remember a little side story here. I made this documentary when I was in southern Utah at the university down there. I literally burned the DVD, and this will tell you the age, right? Like I burned the DVD of this documentary. We had this big premiere, this screening, and there are probably 100 and 150 people sitting in this auditorium waiting to watch this film. I'm like in the lab, like sweating bullets, burning this DVD.
While they're sitting in the auditorium?
As they're gathering. As they're gathering.
Yes.
And I like literally like pull it off, put it back in the machine just to make sure it would like play something.
Yeah, right.
And I walked into the auditorium, handed it to the techie guy in the booth.
That's amazing.
And then presented my film. And I just remember like this absolute chaos around this thing and thinking, holy smokes, like, and I'm sitting in the back, like still sweating bullets. Like, did I leave a clip in? Is everything right? And, it was all right, and people loved it. It was sort of this huge payoff moment, right? Cool. Like you put all this time into something and then it works. But sometimes you just have to pull the DVD out of the machine and take it to the screening.
Yep.
And is it going to be perfect? No, probably not every time. But I think once you do that, and kind of to play off of that, they called me back later to do like another presentation in front of like all the freshmen. So like 500 people in an auditorium watching this film. And it was sort of this payoff moment. Like if you didn't send the first one to 150 people in a tense situation, you don't have the auditorium full of 500 people in the situation repeated.
Exactly. And I think that's exactly why done is better than perfect, right?
Yes.
Because it's nice to get things right, but if you're not failing, right? If some failures, right? Not all failures, right? If you're not failing sometimes, you're never growing.
Yeah.
Like you're just not like, you know, like trees grow strong because the wind blows them.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And if you're not getting blown around a little bit sometimes from time to time, and even that was hard, right? Yep. Like it was hard to like, okay, it's burnt. I hope it's there, right? Like even that was hard, you know. Yeah. And luckily it worked out that time.
And luckily it worked. But I think as a creator of things, you have to press send. Mm-hmm. And so I look at the Lander 2, and I could tell you stories about how this was not quite ready, or I wish it would have been better in these 3 ways. But it's like, at some point you hit send and you go, because you don't get the auditorium of 500 people until you do it at 100. And you don't get the audience of 5,000 until you've done it at 500. And life is like that. You just have to hit send on it, and then it becomes important after. It becomes important to somebody other than yourself. Because when I was editing that documentary, when I was making the Lander 2, yes, it was important to me.
Right.
But who cares if I made it in my basement and nobody ever sees it?
Yep.
Right? Like, and if it's art, great. And that's what you want to do with it. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's a distinction there, an important distinction between profession and art, hobby.
Yeah, hobby. Yeah.
Because for me, knives are a profession. I'm not doing this for funsies.
Right.
Like, there's fun baked into it.
No,
but
of
like,
course. Yeah. You obviously, I mean, you've had a lot of options, right? And you've worked in places that weren't knives, right?
Yep.
Like we were just talking, like you have a lot of opportunities open to you, right?
Sure.
So you've chosen knives for specific reasons. Some
they've
of that
chosen me.
Yeah, fun, community, all that,
Yeah.
right? But also it's still work.
Yeah.
Right? Like
It is.
It doesn't matter what your passion is in life. Like if you're working in it, it's work.
Yeah, and eventually you have to pay the bills. And for me, like having this be the most important knife, it could be 5 years from now. This is not the most important knife
Right.
in what we're doing at KNAFS. But right now, it's like, this is very important.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. What is one thing that you would have changed?
That's funny.
You don't have to share it if you don't want to.
No, that's funny that you just asked. I literally was just looking at the clip insert and... Dang it, lefties. No, you know, it's funny. I've heard that 10% of the population is Southpaw.
Yeah.
That's all well and good, but how that impacts how I design. Like, these clip inserts are funny because there's an ever so slight angle on the end of the lander, and I actually love it. It's sort of this aberration, right? The banter is straight.
Yeah.
Perfectly straight. It stands perfect on end. The lander is just canted, just ever so slightly.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of design, is you just do weird things like that. But what that means is that clip insert is canted if you flip it to the left. So part of what I would maybe I'll do this someday, is include a lefty pocket filler,
Insert.
clip filler insert. But you know, it's little things like that. If I were to do it differently, I would say, to heck with you, Southpaws. You're on your own. Which is not a very kind thing to do.
No, well, and with an ambi lock, you have to have.
You almost have to.
Yeah, exactly.
But like design has consequences, right? If you were to pull that clip filler, you still have to have a screw there.
Yep.
Because it's holding that. So if you give a mouse a cookie, like, there are downstream consequences. So
yeah.
I don't know. I'm pretty pleased with it. It's a little bit big, but honestly, like, people like that 3 1/4 inch size.
I was gonna say, I know it's a little bit big for you,
Correct.
but I actually think it's perfect size.
And
you know what I mean?
I've heard that from a lot of people. In fact, I just heard it in our storefront offhand, listening to a weird conversation.
Yeah.
Somebody was like, "Yeah, Lander 2 is so much better than Lander 3." That's totally good. Like, it's a preference thing, but I tend to agree. Like, this size, there's some sort of golden ratio that just works really well. And if you look at the Lander 3, it has like little changes and differences that make it not as good of a knife as the Lander 2. It's like we shrunk it down to make it work, but this was the original and it just works better.
Yeah. Well, and as you know, shrinking or expanding knives, making knives bigger, like whichever way you go with that, there's always trade-offs, right?
There's
I mean,
always
sometimes
trade-offs.
it's a full redesign. Even if on the hobbyist end and we get the knives and we're like, oh yeah, that's just a little version of this one. There's actually a lot that goes into shrinking or growing a knife.
Yeah, so to get into that just a little bit, like when we shrunk the Lander 3, because the width got smaller, and then it was primarily a width thing. So it's just a, 1/4 inch thinner.
Okay, yeah.
That means that you can't nest the liners, and your stop pin goes internal. And so the stop pin on the Lander 3 is internal, and so when you go to close it, sometimes it will just kind of bounce back, and it's almost a game. You get used to like catching it on the close. But for me, I'm like, dang, I wish that had the same action as the Lander 2. And it's those little things that define like your personal preference around a thing, and then that personal preference can then turn into long-term or short-term sales.
Right, exactly.
Lander 2 has done better than Lander 3.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is the devil is in the details.
It is.
Right? And
it really is.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
So
that was actually something that when we first started working together, I learned very well from you. Was I've always been fairly detail oriented, but you're another level. Like I
can be.
You know, no, and not in a bad way. Not in a bad way, right? Like when we first met and first started. So if you guys don't know this, Ben hired me. That's how I met Ben. You guys know my face because of Ben, basically.
Yeah,
so
I mean, give yourself some credit.
Yeah, I mean, but still, like I got the opportunity because of Ben, right?
That's true.
And I got hired to do copywriting and emails, right? Basically, I think it was just copywriting at the beginning. It wasn't even emails at the beginning. And yeah, like I've always fancied myself a pretty good writer, right? But like there were little technical things or even cultural things about what, because we were writing marketing copy, right? There were little cultural things, right? Where I would write something up and I'm like, yeah, this is pretty good. And then this feedback cycle we would get into, right? Because you would just like this, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I love it. And that's now everything I do, I look at that way, especially when it has to do with like marketing stuff, right?
Yeah.
I look at it the way that you look at it because I think it's the devil's in the details. Right?
It is, and it's hard. Like I think about carpentry. I worked in a cabinet shop for a minute, not carpentry.
Yeah. I mean, but a cabinet shop's a great place to get a taste for carpentry.
Yeah,
right? It's a safe environment, and it's fairly precise.
Yeah. And I think what's the old saying? Like the best cabinet maker knows how to cover his mistakes.
Yep.
Right. Like how to best.
Yeah.
But you think about like finished carpentry, like. You have a lot of leeway if you're doing framing versus finished carpentry.
100%.
Right? Like you can hammer something into place and twist it into place. If you're framing, you can make that work and it's going to go inside the wall.
Yep. As long as the drywall hangs, you're pretty good to go.
Right. And I think when it comes to marketing, dang, you just can't do that.
Yeah.
Like it's so...
There's nowhere to hide.
There's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to hide.
You are the drywall.
Yeah, you are the drywall, the paint, and like... So it's interesting because I think depending on what you do for a career, like... And there's like you can spend too much time doing something. But also like there has to be a level of polish.
Yeah.
And it's hard to teach that. One thing about you, Zach, is you're like an AI machine where like you'll make the mistake once, maybe 1.5 times.
Yeah.
And then you never make it again.
Yeah, that's what I try, yes.
Which is a delightful person to be like their boss. You know what I mean? Like, it'll be like, yeah, we don't use passive voice. And you're like, okay, we don't use passive voice. And then you'll use it again. I'm like, we don't use passive voice. You're like, okay, I get it. And then you never use passive voice again, right? And it's a stupid little thing, but when it comes to a style guide, like being able to iteratively improve and change and then hold the change too.
Right.
Because things tend to wobble.
Yeah, we've both managed people in these spaces, right? And that wobble is very real.
It's and it's I don't know if it's human nature, laziness, or just like don't care. I don't know.
So I'm an AI alley cat.
You're an AI alley cat.
I love it.
I need somebody on the internet to turn that into a thing. An AI alley cat. Use AI for the AI cat. I don't care. We need a t-shirt. Make it so.
I love it. Love it. All right, so when we were talking important knives, you had said that your brain went 2 different directions. Do you have another example of important knives?
Yeah, the other direction it went was like important to the industry.
Okay.
And so I pulled out a Sebenza, and I pulled out a Sebenza maybe in part because Chris Reeve was super generous with his time one afternoon with me.
Yeah.
And I think Chris's way of thinking, we talk about quality. Mm-hmm. Chris was so quality oriented.
Yeah, you want to talk about qualities and the devil's in the detail.
Yeah.
I think even to this day, right? Like even with Chris not at the helm of things, like I think that they have just held it, right? Like talking about wobble, right?
Yeah, they've held that tolerance. Yeah. And so I think you look at, I don't know that the Sebenza itself is the most important knife.
Yeah.
But the philosophy behind it, that we are going to make something and then we're going to improve it incrementally and keep making that thing and making it and making it and make it really dang good.
The stamp the Sebenza has put, or the cloak the Sebenza has put over knife enthusiast ideas, at least.
Yes.
That's what you're talking about.
This is just a really dang good knife.
Yeah. From
a company that cares deeply about the details. And I think that philosophy, and I'm not saying that Chris created that, but I remember visiting Chris, and he's got a Spyderco box on the shelf, and I joshed with him. I'm like, "You checking out the competition?" He's like, "No, Sal Glesser's a great friend." And so you think about like the impact that somebody has that's really like detail oriented and focused on their circle of friends. You look at Spyderco, their CQI, constant quality improvement, like that mentality. And I'm not saying that came from Chris,
right? But
conceptually, he created something that required additional growth and growth and growth.
Yeah.
And within the industry, it raised all the boats. Like you had to start competing with a really great knife.
If you wanted to charge Sebenza prices, you had to at minimum convince people you were doing Sebenza level work. Yeah. And I think that's really interesting because I've done a lot to learn as much as I can about knife history, right? And and I'm always trying to like find all the little corners and little bits and all the connections, right?
Yeah.
But I actually think that you're spot on with saying you were hesitant to attribute it directly to Chris Reeve.
I wasn't alive then, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm guessing.
But when I look at my history, like, right, you have for a long time, I mean, like, you know, let's just take the United States because that's an easy place. There's a lot less history there, right?
Yep.
Like when you look at the United States, you had, you know, when you make horseshoes, what's that guy? Blacksmith. Okay, so you had blacksmiths, right? Primarily blacksmiths were making what were effectively just utility knives.
Yeah.
Right. Like obviously, you know, I did a big piece on Bowie knives.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Bowie
knives or Bowie knives?
Bowie or Bowie? Bowie or
I don't
Bowie? So yeah, I did a big piece on that, right? And that was a style of knife that was very popular. Obviously, you had different types of daggers and swords and stuff that were also popular, right? But then, like then we get into like World War I, World War II, and then we're very much like we have more of a production thing, right? Case is one of the first big production companies in the United States back in like 18 whatever, like they've been around forever, right? And then World War I, World War II, you've got knives as, you know, tools like for war, right? And then it was walking out of that you get your first wave of like really like American custom makers, right? Your Randalls and all the guys that were part of that wave, right? And there's something about those custom makers that I know that they had attention to detail. I know it was quality, but a lot of it was fixed blades.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And really, if you look at a lot of the folders, like there just isn't much. And then Buck, I think, broke the seal on kind of like locking folder, like what we would call more of a modern knife with the 110 in the 60s, right?
Yep.
But then you look at the knives during that whole time period, all the way up to like the late 80s, right? When we start the introduction of Chris Reeve, that late 80s, early 90s. We see a shift in knives.
Yeah, I would even say like if you were to take, so Spyderco files his patent in 81 for a pocket. It was literally a patent for a pocket knife.
I know, it's amazing.
And it's got a pocket clip on it and a thumb hole opener. And you're like, okay, it almost feels like the 80s. And I think the Sebenza came out in like 87. Chris was making knives mid. Yeah. But I think that period in the 80s, Benchmade was founded in 87. Mm-hmm. I think that period from the 80s to the 90s really set this. And I don't know that it was like a knife arms race between these companies.
Yeah, not necessarily.
But I think it was like, oh, Sal did this, Chris did that. Les over at Benchmade did this. And I think that they grew together in ways that they could look at, oh, wow, that's cool. That's interesting. And I think it was healthy competition. And I don't know, I think in some ways you and I have entered the knife industry.
Yeah.
At maybe the end of that era.
Yeah, I agree. I think
in a way,
you
know, like that really innovative era where there's like really like big, bold strides in knives, and now we're kind of the ones to almost go back and storytell around that. Like what happened and how do we end up here in a KNAFS t-shirt?
Right.
Because really, like if I were to come out with a Sebenza that looked like a Sebenza from 1987, I'd be laughed at.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, that's chunky, it's ugly, it's whatever.
Yeah, it's not good for these. But you have to remember, like that was OG tech.
Yep.
Right, Reeve integral frame lock. That was OG tech, and now everybody and their dog makes a frame lock, and that's great.
Yep.
But somebody had to like realize, oh, if you make the lock bar longer, it works better, right? And that's almost common knowledge to us. But I think you and I are sitting in this golden era of knives, and I think that's part of the reason you get a new knife company every week these days, is the trail is blazed.
Yep.
And we just have to like walk it and be like, oh, look, that's what Sal did. Oh, look, that's what Les did. Chris did that. You know, like they almost left their signature on the rocks on the trail, and now it's like, okay, I get it.
Yep, 100%, I agree. Well, and I think that when we talk about bold and innovation, I think there's this concept that I've been toying with a lot lately. You know, I like to think too much.
You and I both. Do you want to hear my saying before you go?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Anything worth thinking is worth overthinking.
I love it.
Which is the antithesis of done is better than perfect. But like that's how I feel like, and maybe that's why done is better than perfect is helpful for me because I operate under this. Anything
it counteracts.
Yeah, anything worth thinking is worth overthinking. You overthought it to like the nth degree, and then you're like, dude, done is better than perfect. Let your art escape.
Yep,
so,
I love
anyway,
it.
sorry.
No, I love that. I absolutely love
As you've been overthinking.
Yeah, so as I've been overthinking about like the internet and algorithms and AI and all of that, right? There is a statistical factual reality you can prove that the internet has a flattening effect on culture, right?
Interesting.
So like, right, United States, our biggest export is a soft export. It's culture. right? Like you can go pretty much anywhere in the world and they know Hollywood movies, or at least Hollywood.
You can get a Coke.
Right? You can get a Coke. You know, right? Like these are the things that we export the most is our soft culture, right? And so with the flattening of culture via the internet, right? And we can argue about why, right? Like in my opinion, I think a lot of it has to do with algorithms trying to sell you things.
Yeah.
So they want to flatten down who you are down to, oh, like I only like this one thing.
Yeah.
I'm not a multifaceted human being. It's way easier for a computer to market to you, for an AI bot to market to you if you are flat, right? But this is also something that I'm not into Magic the Gathering. Never have been. Never really understood it. It's too many rules. But when I remember as a kid that like people were way into Magic the Gathering, playing in junior high and everything. And I recently came across a documentary on YouTube that was like the worst hand ever to win a Magic the Gathering tournament, right? And it was fun because they talked about how bad the hand was, and I didn't understand a lot of it, but it was the principle that was interesting. But they talked about how every hand was really bad at this tournament by today's standards. And the video touched on this point, and this was kind of what helped me crystallize this idea. The video touched on this point that like with the internet, there's no longer like regional deck building or like learning from the best guy at your comic book shop on how to play Magic, right? You can get on the internet and literally with like $1,000, you can build the best deck that's ever existed.
Wow.
And you can literally just get on Reddit and just like read it. Oh, cool. I want this. This is how I want it in my deck. And you may or may not win based on how the cards are pulled and how you play. But it was a flattening of that culture, right? And so I wonder, like, is the internet flattening, right? Like what we do with knives. Like, look at We and Civivi. They used to make a lot of weird stuff, right?
Yeah.
They still make some weird stuff. You know what I mean?
No, but it's...
But you got to sell knives to have a company.
Yeah.
And so, right, you have to funnel down
to vanilla, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think it's an interesting. I'm not putting a point on it. I'm not saying that's what the case is, but it's interesting, right?
Yeah. Well, and you think about, I don't know. You've obviously done a ton of traveling, but like, you talk to somebody and like, let me give you an example. I was in the Netherlands and we walked into a shop that looked interesting.
Yeah.
Didn't know what kind of shop it was. It was like a secondhand outdoor goods shop.
Oh, cool.
And just by the window, I'm walking in there.
Yeah.
Got talking to the lady and she's like, you should try that. We were like, we're from out of town. We got our backpacks on. She's like, you should try this restaurant over here. And we went to a delightful restaurant where they only spoke Dutch. And we kind of point at the menu and Google lens the thing and make it work. And it was a delightful experience. But like, if you were just Googling that, you would have missed it. Yep. And I think maybe that flattening, it's problematic because it doesn't give the world shape. It's like we would have missed out on these really interesting experiences, but we were willing to be outside our comfort zone for one, to be off the Google for two, and talk to somebody, and then you have a not just an experience with the shopkeeper lady, but also an experience at this Dutch restaurant where they don't speak English. You know, like that's cool.
Yep.
And you're gonna miss that if you're only Yelping where to eat lunch. Yep. And I think that we need more of that, where it's like we don't need that confirmation bias from the 12 people around us or the 1,200 people on the internet.
Yep.
Like, if it looks interesting, it probably is. Or if it isn't, you come back with a story and it's cool.
You went and did it. You know what I mean?
I think, I just read an article about this place in Japan. It's one of the onsen towns, these hot spring towns.
Yeah.
It's getting overrun with tourists and they're fighting over where to take their pictures. Yep. And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, you saw it on Instagram. You want to get your picture and post it on Instagram. And it's like, what a weird, hollow way to live. Like, how many other onsen towns do you just like stumble across, or like whatever you're interested in? I think we are, and maybe this is the danger of going down the beaten path that Les and Sal and all these people have made, is we're not coming up with new ideas. We're like, we want that Instagram worthy picture, we want the sales. And I think there almost has to be balance between them.
There has to be, right? Because you can't blaze a new trail if you don't have supplies.
Yeah.
And you can't have supplies if you're not selling things.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
Like Lewis and Clark didn't make it across the wilderness, right? Like with no supplies, right?
Yep.
And without supply, like resupplying, and without a guide.
Otherwise, they're headed back east.
Yeah, exactly. They're
dead. Good point.
And that's the same for a company, right? Like if you're not selling something, like you're dead.
Yeah.
Right?
That's an interesting way to look at it too. I had a friend, and I've had people on the internet be like, Ben, your knife designs are dull and lame and vanilla. And I'm like, look, I'm okay with that because they keep the lights on, man. And like a good friend whose knife designs are kind of weird and wacky and out there, he's like, you gotta do other things. And I'm like, that's fine. You have consistent long-term royalty checks coming in, and I respect that to death.
Yep.
But for me, I have to get this vanilla flavor down before we start doing Rocky Road and chocolate and pistachio. You know, like, let's get vanilla down and then we can do these other things.
Agreed.
So I don't know. And maybe I don't have other flavors and vanilla's fine.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and that's the thing is like, because of how I use my knives and my knife philosophy in general, I like vanilla knives personally. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the early stuff that we was doing, I loved that stuff, like the Isham stuff, right?
Yeah.
It was super cool. I wouldn't never buy it though.
That's me.
I would never buy it.
Yeah.
Like I love that it existed, but I just wouldn't buy it.
Yeah.
And I think especially with some of those early pioneers, I think a lot what was pushing that was the tactical world as well.
For sure.
Like if you go back and look at copy, like starting in the 80s, right? Like all the way into like early 2000s, right? Like if you go back and you look at like some of the copy and some of the ideas around these knives and virtual fixed blades and like, right? Like, like these things, there was so much that was like, bomb crews and the Navy SEALs use this knife.
Yeah.
And that's why this is this way, because it's for turning this certain screw on this nuclear bomb, whatever.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, well, I'm going to buy that for the marketing hype, right?
Yep.
But then it turned out like, maybe that was a little made up, right?
Yeah.
And then it also turned out like, it's not useful in my day to day. So I think there's also like that reality as well. When we're talking about a flattening or a cohesiveness or a collectiveness of it, right?
And it runs in waves and cycles,
It does,
right?
exactly.
Like
Yeah.
when I started at CRKT, we were still in the midst of Afghanistan, right? And we're still selling M16s, and we're out doing these photo shoots in like multicam and flak jackets and like all this stuff. And that's all well and good, but like some of that has toned down. I think culturally has toned down. And now, like, you look at CRKT's website, and they're using, like, teal and, like, these... No offense, CRKT, but I showed their website to a friend, and he's like, it looks like a Pioneer Woman website. Are you familiar with Pioneer Woman? She, like, has this ladies blog.
Not her
like,
specifically, but like since we live in Utah, I'm aware of the mommy blogger world.
Yeah.
And so I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Yes. This friend was like, it looks like Pioneer Woman.
That's funny.
And I was like... You're right.
You're like, oh, I see it.
but that's a stark contrast from 15 years ago when I worked there, 10, 12 years ago. Yeah. And this just rough, tumble, tactical, like, and now it's like softer.
Yeah.
And that's the ebbs and flows of market,
of,
right?
Of the market, right? Because I think that if you were, it doesn't matter which company you are, if you were to dress up somebody from the marketing department in multicam and a flak jacket and go take a picture, you're going to get laughed off the internet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
that moment's gone.
Yeah, people are going to be like, "What are you doing?" Like, I use this to open Amazon boxes. I use this to work on the farm or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like,
it's like aspirational has to meet more reality now. Maybe is the way to look at it.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I mean, and then is there a flattening of reality? And if there is, how does that work with the aspirational? Right?
Yeah.
It's this fun balance.
Yeah, it's weird, man.
Yeah, it's this fun balance. I love
weird.
it. I absolutely love it. So yeah, no, I fun little note. I actually don't own a single Chris Reeve knife. I've never owned one.
Really?
Yeah.
That one was given to me when I left Blade HQ.
Yep.
Otherwise, I would not own it.
Exactly.
I own some Chris Reeve knife posters that I made.
I love it.
Would you like to see my poster Chris Reeve knife collection?
Next time, that's what we'll do. Poster collections with Ben.
Done.
That's great.
I've got volumes.
I was going to say, I bet you do. Well, talking about like ebbs and flows and trends, right? That kind of brings us to the fifth category, the fifth knife, right? That I was like, hey, like, what about this? You know?
Yeah.
And that is fixed blades. And what I specifically asked, I think that you can learn so much about somebody by asking them to pick like 2 of their favorite fixed blades or 2 important fixed blades to them. It's like you only need the 2 to be able to crosshair and be like, boom, this is who this person is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I saw it briefly at the very beginning of this thing. But what 2 have you chosen to personify your fixed blade philosophy?
Yeah, like my 2 knives here.
Yeah.
This is the Explorer double-edged dagger from Japan, 440 stainless. I picked this out from Smith & Edwards when I was probably 8 or 9.
Yes, when they still sold tanks and missiles to civilians.
Yes.
Best store ever.
The place is amazing. So I picked this thing out in the knife case. I was like, small kid, what's gnarly? Bears, lions, I gotta defend myself. Like, double-edged dagger, man.
Yeah.
And credit to my grandpa, he let me pick it out. You know?
Good grandpa moment right there.
I know. Like, it's got like a skull crusher on the end of it.
Oh,
like,
it does?
Yeah,
oh, dude, that's
pommel.
awesome, actually.
Yeah. And like, as an 8-year-old kid, 9-year-old kid, you're like, yes, I have arrived. Well, what happened, we talked about my dad's knife case. Like, this went in the knife case, but it went back.
Right.
Like, back in
you went from whatever pocket
little
knife to
Yellowstone
a
pocket
weapon.
knife. Yeah, no, straight up. He's like, you don't touch this unless I let you.
Yeah.
So like, I would take this on camping trips, and you can actually see like the tip is all bent out of shape because I'm sure I like tried to pry something with it. I'm like, you try to whittle with it, it's got serration. Like this is not a good knife for anybody. Anybody. I'm just gonna period.
I'm 100% with you. Anybody. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It's got challenges, and so like when I was a kid, this was my Rambo knife, man.
Yeah.
Like this, I think every kid should have a knife that makes them feel like they could protect the world.
Yes.
And take it on.
Yes.
This was my Rambo knife.
Yeah.
And then we talk about middle age and maturing, right? I designed the Lulu, and I designed this very specifically to be a whittling knife. When I go camping, I find myself whittling. Victorinoxes are terrible for whittling, like long term, your hand fatigues, all of that. Like they're fine, but like I wanted something that I could actually sit there for hours and whittle a spoon with, and the Lulu is it. And I love it. It fits nice in hand. It's a nice size. You can do kitchen tasks when you're camping with it. It is great for what I actually do.
Well, and we did a whole video on the Lulu here on the channel. You know what I mean? And this is the cool thing about the Lulu is, like you said, it's like what you actually will do, right?
Yes.
Like we talked about this in the video, bushcrafting, right?
Yep.
Bushcrafting is this word, and it's kind of goes back to like when we were talking about tactical, right? Bushcrafting had a moment it was much shorter. But bushcrafting had a little bit of a moment where it's like, I'm going to bushcraft the world.
I'm going to be Les Stroud.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Which
awesome. You know what I mean?
Great.
Yeah, yeah.
But there was a certain like mystique.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like fly fishing, right?
Yeah.
There's all this like magic around fly fishing, and it's like fly fishing is just a type of fishing. You just need to learn how to cast it and like.
And it's beautiful. Like anytime I see.
Yeah. It's very poetic to watch. So I understand it,
yes.
right? And I think bushcrafting still has a lot of that zhuzh on it, right?
Yeah.
But that's the thing is like when we were doing the video, we were talking about like what are you really doing for bushcrafting? Like you're not going out just to bushcraft. Like you're not like I'm going to go out for 3 weeks with just a knife and a canteen, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, no, bushcrafting for me, and I think for a lot of us, is sitting around a campfire, even if it's at your house, like sitting around the fire and practicing some skills. You know what I mean? Cool, let's practice some fire making. Let's carve, like let's whittle some stuff, right? Let's work on making certain notches in wood or like fun stuff like that, right? And then it's things that if you need it, you have it because you've practiced, like we talked about earlier, right? Like, but also like it's more for enjoyment than it's for necessity.
I think it's for a lot of people, it's a hobby. I went to Georgia Bushcraft this year.
Yeah.
And really neat experience. And there's this lady making these bags made out of like roadkill possums. She's like cut the innards out and put a zipper on the bag.
That's
like,
amazing.
Like
I can't believe
raccoons.
you don't have one to show me right now.
Dude, I didn't know what to do. I panicked, Zach. I panicked. I was like, are they gonna let me on a plane with this? Like, what is my wife gonna say? Am I a hillbilly if I buy this? I panicked. Okay, but I look at that and you see somebody flint knapping and you see somebody like making herbal potions, and it's like, you know what? Like this is a hobby that people really enjoy. Mm-hmm. It's great. Slingshots, and it's outside. It's away from a screen. Yep. This is great.
It's awesome. Yep.
And I think we need more of that. And so for me, bushcraft it's a type of camping. Like making a spoon officially would be bushcraft. I don't really use the spoons I make. Maybe occasionally, but I hang them on the wall because it's like, oh yeah, this was this camping trip and that camping trip. Like it's a memory. Yep. And I tend to collect stories and memories. And so for me, being able to make something from that trip this is the perfect tool to do it. And it's pretty low key in that regard. But I don't know, man. Like save the world and like what I actually do.
Exactly.
Like,
well, and I love the sheath on this too because it is so perfectly that era of sheath as well.
Yeah,
like the stainless steel sprung clip on the back, the leather. Like you know how many knives I bought with skulls on them at the county fair that had that exact sheath. You know
that exact pressed leather sheath.
It's just perfect. Yeah.
And this is a part of history, and it's got mud in it still. And it's great, you know. Yeah. I don't ever use it. It sits in my drawer, but this is a part of my history, and it's cool.
It's one of those journal entries.
It's a journal entry.
It's a journal entry, right?
Yep.
Like that's exactly.
Yep. And I think I look at this, and it's like, this is more of a journal entry. I've been to the Amazon with it. I designed it in part to go to the Amazon, and different phases, right? Yep. This is my sleep without a camping pad camping. Yep. This is I just bought a cot.
Right. You know? And I'm flirting with a camper.
I'm flirting with a camper. But which is hilarious is because
the knife that's flirting with the camper era is way more useful and practical though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, this is the thing is I think that Topps, their whole entire catalog, I want everything. I want every single knife in the Topps catalog, right?
The 13-year-old boy inside of you needs it.
Every single one of them. And that's the other thing is like, their knives are legit. I mean, very similar to Lulu. Like, they're meant to be worked. They have a philosophy behind them. But then they have like big, like, machete swords. You know what I mean? And you're like, nobody needs this. But I need it, right? Like, I don't own one yet, but I will one day.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
And like, that's the thing is I think that those personify so much of not just fixed blades, but like just like knife philosophy, right? Like, I'm a big carry guy. Like, I'm like, use what you need what you carry what you need what you carry, all the things, right?
Yes.
But like, I have no problem with like, you want to pay $500-600 for a Grail and throw it in a safe? Sick. Do your thing. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, and I think that you can evolve. I think sometimes
you should evolve.
You should evolve.
I don't think you can. You should.
You should. Yeah. And
exactly.
like, we just got through this whole political cycle, and not to get political about it, but like, you watch like these clips come up from 20 years ago that somebody said, and I'm like, man, I sure hope nobody dredges up something I said 20 years ago.
Yep. Exactly.
Because I just feel like a whole new pancake. You know, like, this is a different period of my life.
Yep.
And I think that the things we carry reflect that evolution of us as human beings. And I would hope that my behavior is consistent over time.
Right.
But the way I think evolves and changes, and it should.
Yep.
It has to. And I think that's, I mean, look at it there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
8-year-old me, 36-year-old me right there.
Exactly.
And I would imagine that 40-year-old me, 50-year-old me is probably going to carry something different.
Yeah.
Because use cases changed, or I don't know.
Hopefully it's like a triple XL Lulu. That's what I want to see.
That would be amazing.
Machete Lulu.
Maybe you go into machetes the older you get.
I love it.
You're like, yes, I'm ready.
I love it.
I'm ready.
Well, this is the thing. We were talking earlier about machetes, actually.
Yeah.
And when we were talking about machetes, you were like, yeah, maybe I want to learn more about machetes, right? Or how to do machetes, or how to use machetes. And this is something that we were talking about there that I think could be pertinent here, because I think the Lulu personifies this. Is like, if you're really interested in something, like, I'm not an independently wealthy person. So I find that if I'm really interested in something and I want to get good at something, or if I really want to learn about something, I'll do it for work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's why I've had so many dang jobs in my life. Is because I'm just like, oh, what's that thing over there? What's that thing over there? You know? And like I had mentioned, like, I'm terrified of the ocean, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, I want to go work on a boat in Alaska. That's the lowest bar to entry I can find to actually work on the ocean. And then I can learn about the ocean. And maybe I'll still be terrified of it.
Yeah.
But like, at least now I'll know about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's like finding work in the things that you enjoy. I feel like if you turn your passion into work, it becomes work. There's no way around that, right? And you have to be okay with that in your brain, right? And I learned that lesson hard a handful of years ago, right?
Yeah.
But the other half of that is that then you actually get the time, because time's so precious, right? To actually learn about something, right? And I would imagine in the production, in the making of the Lulu, you already had a lot of experience with knives, but you probably bought some knives. You probably were feather sticking. You're probably spending more time outside up to the production of the knife, right? Like,
absolutely. And it reflected a philosophy, but also, like, I mean, I molded it in clay to start with, you know, and made it longer, made it shorter, played with it, and like, I don't know, you discover things and you find things, and I don't know, maybe knives are a metaphor for this timeline of life in a way, right? Like, you discover things that you enjoy more or less, and that's okay. Yeah. It's an evolution.
Yeah. I love that.
It's good.
No, I love that. That's great. And I think that's, I mean, to put kind of a fine point on a lot of what we've been talking about, like, I think that like, making things, you know what I mean? Creating things in the world, right? Whether it's marketing copy, right? Which, you know, that's ephemeral, right?
Sure.
Like, it's seen one day and it's completely forgotten the next day, unless it's really bad, and then people remember it.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
But yeah, whether it's all the way to like marketing copy, again, very ephemeral, very, very disposable, up to a knife that you've produced, right?
Yep.
Like, it's in the making of things that I feel like the working of things, right?
Yeah.
You really get experience. You really get to learn, and I think not just learn about the thing, but learn about yourself.
Yeah.
Because there were probably elements of the Lulu. I know this is the case for me. There were probably elements about the Lulu, like, while you were advancing and molding it in clay, you were learning things not just about the knife, but about yourself and what you actually like in a knife. Right?
Totally.
Like your whole process we were talking about, where you've got 50 knives on a table and you're like, what exactly is it about this knife that I like?
Yeah, and I think that you can break that down on a sales level too. Like, why do multiple people, why do thousands of people like this? What elements are in that thing?
Yep.
Why do so many people drive a Honda Accord?
Yeah.
Like, what is it about, like, the price and the value and the consistency? Like, you're not taking a Honda Accord and copying it. You're saying, like, what gives this essence?
Yep.
And when you can boil that essence down, you can then sprinkle it on something else, and it can have similar effect. I would say the Lulu has had that effect on some people. Like, they're like, I love it. I saw one come in the other day. It was just battered.
Yes.
Just hammered. I'm like, I've used mine, but you have used yours.
Yeah.
And I think that when you take those essence, I don't know if it's golden means, I don't know if it's like human nature, but when you take those, you boil them down, you sprinkle them on something new, you're like, yes, I love it.
Yeah.
And that to me is fun. I think that's part of what I love about knives too, is like people just smile about them, man. Like 8-year-old me smiles about this, 37-year-old me smiles about this. And for different reasons.
Inside of you, there are two boys.
Yes, yes.
There are two wolves inside of you.
Yes.
I have a tendency to feed my 8-year-old too much, I think.
You said it, not me.
But yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah.
So I enjoy it. And you and I were chatting earlier about, like, I've heard it said a bunch, come for the knives, stay for the people.
Yeah.
Like, I look at my phone and the text streams. Like, do I even have non-knife friends anymore?
Right.
Let me know in the comments. You know, like,
Right.
like if you know me outside of knives, let me know. Because so much of my life has morphed into that. And it's probably an unhealthy blending of work and home.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I control that. And I have allowed it to happen, and I'm okay with it. And it's good.
Because well, at least what I've found is there's so many great people in the knife world.
There are.
Right? Like I feel like in other industries that I've worked in, right? It's like you have consumers or you have business contacts or whatever, right?
Yep.
But like everybody in the knife world, whether it's somebody who's watching this right now or somebody that I've done design work with or somebody I've done consultation with, for the most part, it's friendships. You know what I mean? And like that's the way that I've always tried to frame my life, is in relationships. Like relationships are my number one. Everything else comes after that, right?
Sure.
So like there's a framing there that helps
Sure.
that situation. But in the knife world, it's so easy, right?
It is.
Like you show up for the knives, stay for the people,
Yeah.
right? And that's what all of what we're talking about here is it's a framework for stories. It's a framework for experience.
Yeah.
And for fun and for life. You know what I mean? Like in a lot of ways. Like, yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So those are my two fixed blades, Zach.
I love it.
They're fun.
It's it's literally like a perfect crosshair of like, now I know exactly who Ben is.
Yeah. Judge me.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, 8-year-old Ben chose this, and 36-year-old Ben designed this. Cool. I know exactly who Ben is now.
Exactly.
Like, I love it.
You know what? I wish everyone kind of had that timeline, because I think it's interesting to see how people evolve.
Yeah, exactly.
In good and bad ways.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, hopefully always leaning towards the better, right?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
That's what I shoot for. And then sometimes I find myself in a valley and I'm like, dang it, I got a big hill to climb.
How did I get here?
Exactly.
Yeah, man.
Cool. Dude, well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. This is fun conversation. We've covered far and wide.
We have, dude. We have gone the depths here, right?
We have.
So I don't really know how to end this, guys, because I haven't done one of these before, if you didn't know. So I think the big thing is thank you, Ben, so much.
Thank you,
for the
Zach.
time. This has been absolutely great. I've had a blast. It's always a great time hanging out.
It is.
And thank you for being my guinea pig.
Absolutely.
I know that I've been intersecting your life all day today in your road, and I'm just happy for the time.
Totally good. Totally good.
And thank you guys for watching. If you made it to the end, you are an absolute champ. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think of this thing, what maybe some different things you'd like to see with it. I'm staying with the 5-knife concept. I might do burgers and fries next time.
It would be enjoyable.
I think that might have to be a thing in the next one that I do.
5 knives, burgers, and fries.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And we'll definitely, there'll be at least a few more so you guys can get a flavor of this and I can see how you guys like it. So we'll continue to tweak it, but let me know who you guys would like to see, even if it's not somebody like Ben who's super famous. I would love to sit down with anybody and talk about 5 knives in life. I think it would be a blast. 5 knives in life. That, might have found something.
I don't know what happened to the burgers and fries, but you do you, man.
But either way, thanks so much guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one.